Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inspiration Summit. I have been looking forward to this day for a really long time, and I could not be more excited to welcome you, to give you a little taste of what you're in for today, to introduce the event, and to set the stage. So without further ado, if you're here listening to me talk, it's because most likely you are aware of Fairygodboss and the Muse, or you received this link from a friend. But I want to tell you a little bit about the two hosts of our summit today. So if we can go to the next slide, let's see, can we go to the next slide? There we are, perfect. So Fairygodboss, which is the community and organization that has been putting on Inspiration Summit for the last 3 years, is an essential resource for over 17 million career-minded women. You'll learn more about Fairygodboss as we go through the day, but it is a community and website where you can find great advice from other women and from experts on how to navigate tricky situations in your career. You can network with other incredible professional women, make connections, again, get advice, build your network. You can also get info about how companies are as a woman. What are their benefits, their policies, what is the experience like of being a woman within that organization? And you can attend hiring events, find jobs, and then also non-hiring events like Inspiration Summit, like our other webinars. So we are really, really thrilled to have you here today. If you go to the next slide, this event is also co-hosted by the Muse, which is a career destination that helps people of all genders, all ages, all backgrounds find that right fit role. The Muse is a company that I founded 11 years ago based on my own personal experience navigating the job search process. It was often frustrating, it was often confusing, and there wasn't a lot of information about what a company was actually like on the inside. Would I enjoy it? Would I be motivated by the communication style, etc.? So on themuse.com today, you can unlock expert professional advice on all topics, anything and everything career. You can discover that right fit job or company, go behind the scenes of different organizations, work with a career coach, learn more, and then again, search for and apply to jobs. So the Muse and Fairygodboss today have partnered to bring you Inspiration Summit, and we have an incredible day in store. So if we go to the next slide, first of all, why are we here? I think we're all here because we believe in the value of community. Today, every day, it is so powerful to both be able to ask for advice, to empathize, and to make others feel heard, to share opportunities, share advice, share your experiences. You can see some screenshots here from the Fairygodboss site. In fact, if you go to fairygodboss.com, you'll see that there's a lot of discussion happening all throughout the day today about what's happening in Inspiration Summit. So again, you can ask questions to the speakers. You can also ask them in the chat on the right, which I'll talk about in a minute. But please go to the feed on fairygodboss.com, participate in the community, hear what others are saying, and check out the site. If we go to the next slide, again, we want to bring both in this event today virtually as well as on fairygodboss.com practical wisdom from a wide variety of perspectives. We want to help people feel that reward of paying it forward, of helping other people learn the lessons that you learned the hard way, maybe help them learn it the easy way or help them benefit from your experiences. And then also that understanding that we're all in it together. I know almost everyone who's listening today has probably been through some really tough career situations. You've probably been in job searches that were stressful and anxious. You've worked with bosses that didn't seem to get you. You might have been at a company that wasn't well architected for the needs of women. But by coming together, sharing our experiences, helping each other, we can all hopefully make our own journeys a little easier and make the world a little bit better for the people that come after us. So if we go to the next slide, we also work with a lot of employers. So if you are here on this webinar and you work with a company that is hiring or that should increase gender diversity within its ranks, please reach out to us. Almost 80% of the Fairygodboss community is open to new opportunities. Some of those people are very actively job searching. Others are happy where they are, but if the right thing came across their radar, they might make a jump. We also help employers learn best practices for attracting women, recruiting, hiring women and underrepresented talent. And we do our best to surface the policies, the examples, the benefits, and the companies that are doing a really great job here so that, again, all of work can be more inclusive and we can all, again, work together to build a work that works for all of us and not just a few. So please, if you're an employer, if you're on the hiring side, reach out to someone from Fairygodboss or someone from the Muse. We'd be happy to talk. All right, so I'm going to ground us very quickly in the landscape. If we go to the next slide, there are 4 trends I want to touch on before we dive into our content. One, so many of you have seen the news about layoffs. They have particularly hit the tech industry hard, but it's a time in which a lot of companies are facing economic uncertainty. There are headlines about the balance of power shifting back to employers, which I don't necessarily believe is a long-term trend, but we'll talk more about that later. There's also a lot of headlines about how layoffs are hitting diversity and inclusion jobs hard. And some companies are actually stepping back from the commitments that they've made in the last few years to increase gender diversity, to increase racial and ethnic diversity. And so how, as individuals who care about building a more equitable workforce, do we engage in the face of all these big trends? If we go to the next slide, there's also been a lot of conversation around toxicity in the workplace. On the Muse side, we found that anytime we publish something about toxic workplaces, we talk to someone about toxicity in the workplace, it outperformed everything else on themuse.com. People are fascinated by what does it mean to be a toxic workplace? How do you exit a toxic workplace? How do you make sure as a leader and a manager that you're not setting the wrong example? So we talked about toxic aware being the word of 2023, helping people recognize unhealthy patterns, believe that they deserve better, stand up for themselves, pursue changes, not only for yourself and for others. If we go to the next slide, we also did an incredible survey on what does it mean for an organization to be toxic and what is the impact? And unsurprisingly, when an organization is not communicating or behaving in a healthy way, when employees are not treated with respect, you tend to see lower employee retention and more departures. You often see lower motivation and productivity. So we have a lot on themuse.com and on Fairygodboss about toxicity and how we can combat it together. If you go to the next slide, there's also this challenge of the broken rung. You can see here that in entry-level jobs, you have a much more diverse set of people being hired. 33% of people being hired in the corporate pipeline are white men, 19% are men of color, 29% are white women, and I believe down there that's 19% are women of color. Yet as people get promoted, as you go higher up in the ranks, you see a much less diverse C-suite, a much less diverse SVP level. I personally experienced this in my first corporate job where the entry-level class was nearly 50-50. It was very diverse on a lot of metrics. And then when I looked up to the highest levels of the organization, it was 95% men and 5% women. So how do we combat the broken rung, both as individuals and systemically? We're going to talk about that a lot today. And then if we go to the last slide, the 4th trend I want to just quickly call out before we dive into our content is this question of return to office. The Muse has published a lot of data on return to office preferences. Fairygodboss has published a lot of data. This is really interesting. This is from fairygodboss.com. 51% of respondents to a recent survey preferred hybrid or flexible work. 48% preferred remote only, and only 1% preferred in-office work, which I think is a fascinating commentary on the state of things. So again, we're going to talk about a lot of these trends, but if we can go forward to the next slide, I want to get to the content. So today we're going to talk a lot about motivation, inspiration. How do you bring your best self to work? How do you fire yourself up to make those big moves, ask for what you deserve, own your agency? We're also going to talk about how to challenge the status quo. How do you become an advocate for more inclusion, more equity, more diversity at your organization and in your networks? Also, very tactically, how do we advance our careers? How do we earn more money? How do we navigate career pivots, returnships, big transitions? And then how do we define what we want out of all of it? How do we define our career ambitions, our life ambitions, and are those the same things? We're also going to give you plenty of opportunities to meet other members of the Fairygodboss and Muse community in the chat or elsewhere, and more. So it's going to be an action-packed day. I'm very excited. You'll hear a lot from me because I will be emceeing all the way through. If we go to the next slide, these are some of our keynotes. We couldn't even fit all of our incredible speakers on one slide, but I wanted to call out a couple of our fireside chats and keynotes. At 11:10 a.m. ET, you will hear Joanna Coles in conversation with Naima Raza. That is going to be about career ambitions and life ambitions. I got a little preview. It's going to be spicy. I love it. Please don't miss it. At 12:50 p.m., we have the incredible Bea Arthur, founder and CEO of The Difference, talking about how to manage your energy and make things work for you. That is going to be another fantastic one. Then at 4:05 p.m., I'll be interviewing Tobin Heath, two-time Olympic gold medalist, two-time World Cup champion, equal pay advocate. I have heard Tobin speak. She is just electric. So please tune in for that. And then at 4:35, Lisa Borders, former president of the WNBA, co-founder and CEO of Golden Globe Media. Lisa has had an incredible career across government, across business, across policy. So these are a couple of our keynotes, but we have panels, we have smaller chats, we have breakout sessions all the way through. Check the agenda on the link from Hopin. It's going to be an action-packed day. All right, moving forward, navigating the event. The lobby, that's the information hub. You can find the full agenda. That's kind of home. Then there's the main stage. This is where the majority of the event will take place. Tune into the main stage for the content, for the speakers, for the panels, etc. And then networking. You can network with other attendees, be paired with another attendee for a live video conversation. It's only 3 minutes long. So come in, turn your camera and microphone on, meet other women. And we have some men here in the audience too. You're very welcome. We're excited to have all of you. So meet each other from the Fairygodboss and the Muse communities. During the event, you can find important announcements in the chat. On the attendee tab, you can direct message other attendees. And then on the main stage, in the chat, you can write comments, questions, share your feedback. Please don't be shy. As someone who speaks frequently at these events, it is so fun to see the chat light up. So share your experiences, introduce yourself, ask questions, be a participant, because that makes it more enjoyable for everyone. And then we'll have some polls. You can engage with polls. And again, you can see on the screen where that's going to be on the main stage. All right. Last things, follow Fairygodboss on social. Please follow the Muse on social. This is where you are going to hear more about upcoming events. If you have an idea for an event, please suggest it to us. We'd love to hear. If you're tweeting about the event today, posting on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever your platform of choice is, TikTok, tag #Inspo Summit so we can find it, so others can find it. And obviously, we would love to have you mention at Fairygodboss and at the Muse in any post that you share. All right. Huge thank you to our sponsors. We have some truly incredible people who have really helped us make this event possible. It takes a lot of work and time to put on an event like this, and we're really grateful to the companies that partnered with us to help us do this. There are a large number here, but I'll call out a couple: Achieve, Career Group Companies, Casa Comos Brands Group, Dow, GE Power, Infosys, Dish Network, Pfizer, many, many others. I just, again, want to thank all of you for what you do to support women and their allies in the workplace today and every day. And now I'm going to turn it over to an interview with Stacey London. So many of you may be familiar with Stacey as the co-host of the iconic TLC show, What Not to Wear. Stacey hosted that show for 10 years. A lot of people on here probably grew up with it, learned what not to wear from the show. She's also been a regular correspondent on The Today Show, The Oprah Show, Access Hollywood, Rachel Ray. Stacey has been a spokesperson for Pantene, Dr. Scholl's, Lee Jeans, Woolite, and her book, The Truth About Style, was a New York Times bestseller. Then in 2020, Stacey co-founded State of Menopause, which was a non-hormonal product line for those experiencing menopausal symptoms. And she did this due to her own experience with menopause and this realization that we had a cultural taboo around an experience that half the world's population will go through. Then Stacey actually sunset the brand in 2023, recognizing the need to focus on education and healthcare advocacy for those in midlife and in menopause. And her next project, which is a media platform dedicated to these same issues, will debut in early 2024. I have known Stacey for years. I have been so inspired by the boldness of her choices and the way that she has brought so much attention, particularly in these last few years, to women's issues. And I'm so excited to have her here today. We had a conflict, and so Stacey and I pre-recorded this video interview just a few days ago, and I'm really excited to share it with you. So we can tee up that video, and then we will roll straight from that into our first panel. Thank you all so much, and you'll hear from me again later. Stacey, I am so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. So I want to dive right into it. I had so much fun putting together a couple of quick questions for you. And the place I wanted to start is, you have had such an incredible career with different twists, turns, bold leaps. You started as a fashion editor at Vogue, to a celebrity stylist, to co-host of What Not to Wear, television personality, and now entrepreneur, menopause advocate, and CEO. So I would love to just start by asking if you could tell everyone who's listening a little bit about your story, and particularly how you thought about some of these career transition and jumps. What inspired you to make the change, and what are some of the challenges you faced in it?
Oh my God, so many good questions. I don't know where to start with that one. I think that, you know, the origin of my career really was wanting to be in fashion, right? And I could go into how, you know, as a very insecure young girl, fashion felt so glamorous and sparkly and somehow in the know, because certainly, you know, when I was in print in the 90s, print was queen, right? I mean, you know, we knew everything 6 months before the general public did. We saw fashion shows early. There was like this sense of being like really in it, in the thick of it, in the cognoscenti that I loved. But it took many, many years and many, many jobs in the fashion industry, not just only to learn the ropes, but also to kind of understand that ambition and aspiration is one thing, but ambition and aspiration really don't do very much for you unless they eventually evolve into also self-awareness, right? And for me, it was a huge realization to realize that fashion and beauty and style industries were really based on our insecurities, right? That's how they run. That's how they make money. And really to have that recognition, that realization for me meant, oh, wow, okay, I've been feeding into a deep wounded, you know, childhood insecurity about being good enough or cool enough or pretty enough or fashionable enough. How am I using this in the right way? And strangely, that really didn't come to me until I got the job at What Not to Wear. And I was able to see really the connection between style and self-expression and psychology and mood and emotions and sentimentality and all of these things that I don't know that I would have necessarily recognized in myself if I hadn't been able to work with others on their kind of honing their version of themselves, honing their own sense of self-expression, really sort of leaning into what that means or what that meant for them. The first thing is, I think, to really understand for myself the difference between kind of the aspirations that I was somehow inherently taught that I should have, right? An ambition that I should have, which, by the way, came with its whole set of sort of antiquated competitive notions with women. So that's a whole other story. To the point where I was able to recognize that my ambition and aspiration wasn't really what I thought it was in the first place. It was much more about connection. It was much more about compassion. And I didn't know that style had the power to do that, or to have that conversation was important, or to raise somebody's sense of self-esteem by giving them agency over their own self-expression, over, you know, their own sense of personality. So those were the two big things for me. And I think that leading into that idea that ambition and aspiration has to come with some sense of self-awareness is going to create a kind of evolution in your work life, for sure. I mean, maybe also in your personal life, actually, now that I think about it. But for me, it became much less about the vehicle by which I was sort of delivering the message, and much more about this message of, how do you feel about yourself? How are you expressing that in the world? Is that helping you? Is that hurting you? And that became a much bigger conversation. When I saw that menopause was something that people didn't want to talk about, I will tell you, many fashion friends said to me, you're going to commit career suicide if you start talking about this. And I thought, well, then you're the problem, aren't you? Mm-hmm. And that's why I decided it needed discussion. And I started that conversation almost 3 years ago. And now, we're in the midst of sort of a menopause renaissance.
Yeah. And I think that it's been so powerful to watch, the conversation that you started has been taken up, I think, by more and more people. And it's really also shown a light on the fact that this is a huge transformative experience affecting nearly all women that for a long time society just sort of put in a corner, and I think didn't talk about, didn't give its due, didn't share. And I love the way that you've taken the platform and following that you built in a number of different sectors and used it to shine a light on something that's really important, and that that both scientifically and culturally we should probably be paying a lot more attention to.
I mean, 1,000%. Part of the reason we're not paying attention to it is because there is no clinical data, right? There's no formal study that's ever been done solely on perimenopausal people, either those who identify as women who have female physiology, ever.
We are about to dive into a panel on career transitions, and I'm sure a lot of women in our audience are facing or considering kind of big transitions of their own. What advice would you have for someone to make the transition process smoother and maybe less intimidating?
Yeah. Well, I think, look, any career pivot is intimidating, whether it feels forced on you or it's your choice, right? And there are certain things that I would say practically, you really want to think about what that pivot is going to do to you. Do you have enough savings so that you can make that pivot kind of seamlessly until you're up and running and making money? If you've already understood what that pivot is going to require and you know that you will have incoming funds, great. Think about what kind of hours that's going to be in terms of the commitment that you're going to have to make to a new career. How is that going to affect your family, your friends? Are you ready to feel lonely and isolated if you are making, significant changes, if you're leaving a big company or starting your own? And I think the most important thing is you have to really learn to have an unwavering belief in what it is that you want to do and why you want to do it, because you will be told no many more 1,000 times than you will be told yes. Just like people told me, don't talk about menopause, you're going to ruin your career. If I had listened, I would not have kicked the can down the road. This conversation would not be where it's at right now. I am very proud of the work that I've been able to do. And granted, again, I'm learning as I go. Product wasn't for me, took the wrong road. But was I wrong about the topic? No. You're going to have to be able to do what I like to call the cha-cha, right? 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. It's not linear. And if you're going to make that change and you are committed to this pivot, just know there will be days where you're stepping back and days where you're jumping forward. Just, get ready and make sure you have like Dramamine or something.
I was going to say it parallels my own experience so much. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We'll put the links in the chat to Instagram, Pinterest, anywhere else that you want people to go to follow you, to get more information. But this was absolutely fantastic. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.